This is a heist for the Toronto Maple Leafs. As a brand new report has dropped, a shocking report from Elliot Friedman revealing some huge information as it pertains to the Leafs trade plans. We're going to break down exactly what that report is and discuss what this means going forward as the Leafs prepare for something big. But before we get into it, if you're part of the 71% who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. We'll be live following the game tomorrow night. Finally, hockey games are back. But Darius, a huge report dropped from Elliot Friedman that is shaking not only the Leafs hockey world, but the hockey world in general. And it is surrounding Mikko Rantanen. And this is the same Mikko Rantanen that was shockingly traded just a month or so ago. This is getting a little bit crazy. And let's dive right into it. And this is the report. Let's not waste any more time. Teams could view Mikko Rantanen as an NHL trade rental target, according to Elliot Friedman. And if they trade him, Carolina could retain salary in the trade, making Rantanen's remaining cap hit $2.3 million. And we had a video on this a few weeks ago, maybe a couple weeks ago, surrounding Mikko Rantanen and the Leafs targeting him in the offseason. There could be a chance now, and there is a chance that the Leafs target this player a lot sooner than we thought over the next couple weeks as the trade deadline inches closer and closer.
I said at the time, because like you said, we did a video on this a couple weeks ago when it became a real possibility, or a possibility, I should say, that, they might actually move off of this guy. I do believe that the Carolina Hurricanes, as crazy as it sounds, are going to actually trade Mikko Rantanen before this year's trade deadline, because I don't think they're going to be able to re-sign him. I don't know if he's going to re-sign in Carolina. I think he's either going to sign with the Toronto Maple Leafs this offseason or the New York Rangers. Those are the two teams that I think he's going to end up going to. Maybe, I'll throw it out there, Colorado, but, if they change their mind in the offseason, maybe he wants to go back, but I think that might be done. But I don't think Carolina thinks they can re-sign him. I don't think he wants to re-sign in Carolina, so they want to get some type of asset back from him, and will go as far as retaining majority of his contract for the rest of this season. So it would not be much for any team to take on, which is really going to spice things up around the trade deadline, and especially for the Leafs, because I wonder if they make a trade for him where they don't even have to give up one of their bigger stars.
Yeah, or maybe they do, and we can talk about a little bit of Mitch Marner in a minute, which is something that's interesting. But I want to dive into the report more. So, on the 32 Thoughts podcast, big section on Mikko Rantanen's future. There were some contract talks during the Four Nations. Chicago retained 50% of his contract in the trade, and he can be retained again if Carolina moves him. As a rental, there will be a lot of teams checking in, and the Leafs are going to be among those teams. And you think about how effective of a player he is. We'll dive into his stats a little bit. 10th overall pick in 2015, two-time All-Star, 55 goals just a couple years ago, has won the Cup. I mean, he would be a special player. He is a special player. He would be a special player for this Toronto Maple Leafs team. And given the fact that he can be like double retained basically because Chicago retained, and then of course Carolina wants to retain some more, the Leafs can get him in a cap hit where this will be very interesting. They might not have to give up one of their big salary guys like a Mitch Marner, but we will also discuss that. This would it would empty out the, farm or whatever you want, the Leafs prospect pool here, and we can dive into what that means. But the retained salary section, because Chicago retained 50%, makes things very interesting, and I think that this is a very possible option for the Leafs.
I think if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs at this year's trade deadline, because this wasn't a possibility before today. We didn't hear too much about this in terms of him, being traded with retained salary, double retention, right? We didn't know if that was a possibility, but it does seem like that is the case, and that might be what Carolina is thinking at this point in time, and it's looking more likely that they will end up trading him by the trade deadline. That being said, the Leafs, if you can get him, if you're the Leafs at this year's trade deadline and you have to win a Stanley Cup in the next 2 years, and you have an opportunity to get Mikko Rantanen, one of the most, an elite player in this league, for less than $3 million or around $3 million, Easton Cowan, Fraser Min, anyone else on the Marlies, anybody else, you're out the door. You are out the door. I love those players. I think they're going to be great, and they're going to continue to develop. You are out the door if you have an opportunity to get Mikko Rantanen at this year's trade deadline and the opportunity to sign him. Because like I said, I truly believe this offseason it could get a little crazy. Things may have changed after last night, after, we saw Mitch Marner actually perform in a game that had stakes with the contract negotiations this offseason. But if you have an opportunity to sign him this offseason, why not trade for him right now? And I think that he's either going to sign with the Leafs or the Rangers this offseason. So it's going to get really crazy, I think, this deadline as we inch closer to the deadline, because again, as you inch closer, teams have more money to spend, you can retain more. So it's going to be crazy.
Yeah, and if the Leafs think that one of the number one priorities is going to be Mikko Rantanen, and then trading for him makes even more sense because you now have the advantage on a team like the Rangers or even the Avalanche because you are finishing a season with the Leafs in this case, and then they could have some leverage there as it pertains to getting it. And if you're unfamiliar with exactly how the trade went down, Carolina traded for Rantanen back on January 25th, and if they were to move him in another deal, they would have the ability to retain his salary, which could push his cap hit down to 2.3, which is absurd. It's like Ryan Reeves money. That would open the door. That's less, I think, than Ryan Reeves money. Open the door for many contenders to pursue him, which might start a bidding war for the 28-year-old. Most of the top teams in the NHL are pressed up against the salary cap. So now let's keep in mind, it's not just going to be the Leafs that are pursuing a guy like Mikko Rantanen. There's going to be a lot. However, there is something to be said about the amount of teams that could actually go out and fork out the money for him in the offseason. I think most of the teams, albeit the really high caliber teams, will try to make a trade as a rental. But for the Leafs, you could try to convince yourselves as this could be more than a rental. It could give you the upper hand as it pertains to actually getting a deal done prior to or after the season started there. And obviously 2.3 million is very, very cheap. Now, obviously, the Leafs have, if you want to match that salary, you can, add Ryan Reeves, add somebody else. Ryan Reeves making 1.3-ish this year, I believe it is. So you can add someone else there and get this deal done. A ton of prospects, obviously, as well, but you're talking about players who aren't very effective that you can, no offense to Ryan Reeves, but that you can use that, match salary. Reeves, someone else can make some sense here.
Yeah, you can make it work, especially if you attach a couple prospects, first round pick to it, right?
Picks for sure.
I don't know. Yeah, definitely picks. They don't have their first this year, but next year, something like that, they can make it work. Keep in mind though, heading into next season, Mikko Rantanen wants to make 14 or more than $14 million. So keep that in mind. Yes, the salary cap is going up, but keep that in mind. If you do trade for this player, Mitch Marner is probably not returning. But that being said, even with what happened last night, I think I'd rather Mikko Rantanen on this team. He's a bigger body. We know he can get it done, and he's an elite player in this league. So I would rather that. And again, the pitch wouldn't be that complicated. Hey, do you want to come play with Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, and William Nylander, right? Like that, sure, this year, yeah, sounds like a ton of fun. And after next year, even if Mitch Marner leaves or whatever, they could figure it out, the cap situation, right? Even if they were to leave, hey, do you want to stay and play with Austin Matthews, William Nylander, right? And even maybe John Tavares, you could still throw in there. He's a pretty good player. But, this would change everything. Maybe you don't have to sign John Tavares. We're talking about it because, he would be a great player to bring back, right? Because he has been so good for this team in his role. But, you don't have to re-sign him. You can absolutely make this work. So this has changed things. And if they can acquire him at this deadline for that cap hit, I mean, they don't even have to send too many assets the other way in terms of, salary cap dumps. So I would definitely pursue this. And you made a good point just a couple of minutes ago that I'm sure a lot of teams would be in on this, but not every team is going to make sense of this. Like, I don't know how many teams want to bring him on as a pure rental, right? Like the Leafs and the Rangers, I could see it happening because I think that he would re-sign with those teams.
Yeah, the Leafs will probably be willing to give up a bit more because they think they can bring him back. I mean, when it comes to actually matching the salary, depending on what Carolina wants, if they want some more NHL caliber players, you can make it work there. I mean, David Camp makes a similar salary, which is absurd. Not actually a similar salary to 9.2, but to what the cap hit would be. So there's a lot of different avenues here for the Leafs not to have to give up a ton of actual contributors to their team and still get Mikko Rantanen. So let us know down below what your thoughts are. It's a little bit wild. Their current cap space is 2.01 million. It's going to be a wild next few days, next few weeks. And we're going to keep you up to date with all the latest news. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. See you guys later.